If Spain's 0-0 draw against Cabo Verde was a question, then this 4-0 win against Saudi Arabia is the answer. For 4 days, the discussion about Spain was entirely about its finishing, its passing, chance conversion, you know the drill. Spain had 75% possession against Cape Verde, useless possession, sideways passing. They completed more than 90% of their passes and still failed to score. Therefore, everyone assumed that the problem was that Spain needed to be more clinical, they needed to convert more chances, they needed to shoot more. Perhaps Gavi shouldn't have started, Ferran Torres shouldn't have started, Mikel Oyarzabal should have taken his chances better. But let me tell you something, Spain did not fail against Cabo Verde because it suddenly forgot how to finish chances. They failed because they tried attacking a defensive structure for 90 minutes that was not meant to be attacked in the way they did. The score remains 0-0 because Cabo Verde was never really forced into making difficult decisions. So what changed against Saudi Arabia, and how did Spain end up scoring 4 goals against a team that held Uruguay to a 1-1 draw? Football at the highest level is becoming a game of decision making at a very rapid pace. Every elite attack seeks to place defenders in places where there's no other options available. The objective is not to merely move the ball from one side of the pitch to another, but it is to ask questions. Should the centre back step out to hold his line? Should the fullback engage the winger or hold his half space? Should the midfielder track the runner or close the passing lane? The moment defenders start asking themselves these questions, errors start coming up. Against Cape Verde, Spain rarely posed enough questions like these. Against Saudi Arabia, they asked them consistently. After the match against Cabo Verde, Luis de la Fuente himself said that Spain needed more verticality than they showed against Cabo Verde. They wanted to suffocate Cabo Verde from the opening whistle, but instead ended up getting suffocated themselves because they did not ask questions. Verticality in this context, it was not about launching the ball forward or abandoning possession. No. In terms of the game against Saudi Arabia, it was about forcing Saudi Arabia to defend, facing their own goal, to retreat, to run backwards, and most importantly, to keep adjusting their shape all the time. That adjustment began before the first goal was even scored. One of the underrated characteristics of Spain's win over Saudi Arabia was how narrow their attack had become. Lamine Yamal repeatedly drifted inside. Dani Olmo sought the central spaces. Pedri occupied pockets between the lines. The fullbacks often arrived in support positions rather than attacking positions. Sorry, I must have said Saudi Arabia, but these are actually characteristics of the game against Cabo Verde. Against Cabo Verde, none of these movements were actually problematic. As a consequence, Cabo Verde did not have to defend large distances and could easily spend time repelling the Spanish attack. But Saudi Arabia encountered a different challenge. Pedro Porro and Marc Cucurella remained significantly more aggressive in their positioning. Spain's front line occupied the width of the pitch with greater discipline and consistency. The Saudi bloc was suddenly required to, defend spaces that it had not been required to defend against Uruguay. Every wide pass forced Saudi Arabia to shift across. Every switch of play demanded another collective movement. Every advanced position occupied by Porro or Cucurella required another defensive adjustment. And unlike against Cabo Verde, Spain attacked these adjustments with speed. The opening goal in the 10th minute did not just give Spain a lead to take into the rest of the game, but it actually validated their entire approach. Saudi Arabia had been made to move repeatedly before the goal. The distances between players became uneven, and as a result, their defense became unstable. Oyarzabal found Yamal and Spain had their breakthrough. Lamine Yamal's role deserves particular attention because modern football increasingly constrains players whose influence cannot be measured solely through goals and assists. Certain players move with what coaches call gravity. Whenever he received possession, Saudi Arabia immediately had to adjust. Midfielders shifted towards him. Fullbacks tried to cover his passing lane, predicting what he might do next. Passing lanes opened and closed. Every defensive action created another problem. What Spain did was brilliantly exploit those reactions. One statistic from the Cabo Verde game was that very striking for me was that Oyarzabal became the first player since 1966 in a World Cup match to not register a single touch within the first 30 minutes. It was a remarkable illustration of how disconnected Spain's forward had become from that game. Because in that game, Oyarzabal could not drop deeper because he did not have any wingers that would occupy the space that he would leave when he drops deep. You got Gavi and Ferran Torres, not orthodox wingers. They don't know what to do when Mikel Oyarzabal drops deep, and so he remained isolated up front. Tonight, Oyarzabal had Alex Baena and Lamine Yamal, two experienced wingers who know exactly what to do, who know exactly how to use Oyarzabal's movement to complement their game, And that change for Luis de la Fuente was probably one of the smartest ones he did. When that happened, center backs became much more aggressive because they don't fear space behind them. They try to step into midfield. They compress the distances. They support the teammates. Entire defensive structure become more compact because the last line feels secure. Oyarzabal is a striker whose depth constantly threatens that. The defensive line retreats slightly when Oyarzabal is on the ball. The midfielders, they don't know what to do. The spaces between lines expand, and that is precisely what happened to Saudi Arabia. Oyarzabal's contribution cannot be reduced to his 2 goals or his singular assist. Those moments were simply the manifestation of a visible, broader influence that he had on the game. By remaining high and constantly occupying and troubling defenders, he changed the geometry of the match. Because of him, Pedri and Dani Olmo suddenly enjoyed more space and time between the lines. Rodri found more progressive passing lanes. Combinations became easier to do because Saudi Arabia's line kept on getting more and more stretched. And because of that, the goals that followed arrived rapidly. Within 23 minutes, Spain were 3-0 up. Oyarzabal, as I said, had assisted once and scored twice. According to Opta, he became only the second player since 1966 to be involved in 3 goals inside the first 25 minutes of a FIFA World Cup match. As for Saudi Arabia, conceding early, forced him to become more ambitious, I would say, in a way. And when you're ambitious against Spain, it tends to create chances for Spain that they really know how to exploit. As Saudi Arabia stepped forward in search for a response after that first early goal from Lamine Yamal, their distances became even larger. The midfield and the defense was leaving so many spaces for the Spanish players to exploit that they could not even believe it, I would say. Even the stats back up what I'm trying to say here. Spain finished the game with approximately 67% possession, 22 shots, and let me check, and nearly 3 expected goals. So they got 1 more goal than they were expected to score. Saudi Arabia produced just 3 shots and around 0.14 expected goals. It was absolute suffocation. This is what happened to Spain against Cape Verde that they influenced this time around on Saudi Arabia. Spain's pressing looked like the pressing of a team that understood exactly how possession and defending should complement each other. Elite possession teams do not really monopolize the ball because they enjoy passing, they monopolize it because it allows them to control where the game is played. The closer the ball remains to the opposition goal, the more chances you have to score, and you reduce the distance required to counter-press after losing possession. Spain's recovery structure was also excellent this time around. Whenever Saudi Arabia regained the ball, they immediately encountered pressure. This is a staple of Luis de la Fuente team that we did not really see against Cape Verde. That immediate gegenpressing style 3-second press trigger. Rodri stepped forward aggressively, midfielders attacked second balls, wide players closed the central passing lanes, fullbacks maintained advanced positions and compressed the pitch. Saudi Arabia never escaped, really. The shots and approximately 0.14 expected goals, they are an evidence of a team that almost spent the entire afternoon unable to establish any meaningful territorial control. And for Spain, this matters enormously going forward because this victory was valuable because now they are clear at the top of Group H. They have 4 points. The next best is Cape Verde with 2 points, then Uruguay with 2 points, and Saudi Arabia with 1 point. Their final game is against Uruguay, who are not having the best of the tournaments. They drew back-to-back with Saudi Arabia, 1-1 draw, and Cape Verde, 2-2 draw. Credits to Cape Verde, given they have been playing spectacularly well. But the Cape Verde draw exposed genuine structural issues and a lack of faith from Luis de la Fuente on some of his wingers. The team lacked width, struggled to destabilize low blocks or compact defensive blocks, and frequently circulated possession without purpose. Now, those problems became the focal points of their solution. The width was better, the occupation of the last line was improved, the movement around Yamal became more coordinated, the circulation of possession became slightly more powerful and meaningful, and more importantly, Spain stopped treating possession as an objective, as a number that they have to meet, and started using it as a mechanism for creating disorganization. And that is why the Saudi Arabia game felt so different and was won so easily by Spain. But now the challenge is whether that sticks with Uruguay when they come and face Spain for the last game of the group, because Uruguay have everything to play for. They only sit with 2 points behind Cape Verde. If they don't get the result against Spain, I think they will end up third in the group, depending on what happens between Spain and Cape Verde. But if we have to predict what happens, I'm assuming Cape Verde get another result. Maybe they beat Saudi Arabia or get a draw. A draw is enough for them to qualify to the knockouts if Uruguay don't get a win against Spain. So we're not here to talk about Cape Verde, at least not in this video. But for Spain, they have to face an Uruguay team that will be motivated and will be going all out from the first whistle. But the good thing is Spain have solved one problem that has plagued them since the Cabo Verde game, for what the entire world has been trolling them for. But the next match will actually tell us if they genuinely evolved or whether the Saudi Arabia game was just a fluke. For that game, for analysis of that game, make sure you subscribe to La Liga Vic, and I'll see you in the next one. Hasta luego.